very much, and thank you all for coming across who came from your track. Much appreciated to see you here. Delighted to have a full house. So I guess let's talk about unleashing the influence and impact of practice-based teams and what that means as well. So let's look at scenarios of we want to introduce a new test automation tool. We want to improve our regression test suites. We want to integrate performance testing for the first time into ISCLC. These are all real scenarios that we face all the time in every company we move to. This talk is about how to get those things done, how to make that change, and how to have people trust you to be able to do it. How you keep that things. It's not about technology, it's about culture, it's about process, and it applies to any technology, any problem you're trying to solve. By the end of this, we'll understand how to set up the team for success, the resources that we have to succeed, and where we can go to learn more as well. In this, it'll be a little academic, but bear with me, it's the rationale behind the things. So let's look into defining influence impact. So very simply, power to meaningfully affect change is your influence. The ability to deliver change is your impact. So it's your influence is others trust you to deliver. When you have that trust, you have freedom. You can deliver more easily. It's hard to gain, but really easy to lose. Your impact is that others feel the work you do. Positive impact builds influence. Again, it takes effort to sustain, it's hard to start, but you got it, it's easy to lose. Let's look at influence a bit more. So this is where we get a little academic, going into the work that French and Reagan did in the 50s and a little bit more in the 60s. 6 types of power. So coercive, that's where you have control. You can threaten someone, so your manager can fire you. Yes, type of power, what is it built? Resentment. It's not something you can really use to sustain change. Reward, to pay your bonus. Yeah, that works, that incentivizes. First time. Second time, and then it loses meaning. And then you only get the minimum to achieve the reward. So it's not a sustainable approach to change. Legitimate power, so these are based on our social norms. This is your leadership structure. They have the power to dictate something. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but they have that power, and they have that power because of the social norms we put in those hierarchies. A lot of those social norms, or that power, is derived from coercive and reward. Expert, this is the knowledge. This is the knowledge you have as a person that creates trust, that people know to go to you and rely on. Referent, that's the respect. That's the respect you have as a person. That's the respect you gain by delivering. That's your influence. Last of all is information. So that's when people control information as a form of power. It's not a great idea, it does give you power. That power disappears the second that information is shared. It is not a sustainable power. And it builds resentment. Only 2 of them are personal traits. Expert and referee. It's what you know, and it's what you do. Which means it's something you can control. Your influence isn't driven by your job title. It isn't driven by your seniority. It's driven by what you do and who you are. Which means every one of us in this room can influence change. Let's look at impact. So impact, ability to meaningfully deliver change, there's really 2 ways to measure that. Your metrics, your raw numbers, your actual data that tells you something has changed. You've also got your quality metrics, so your perception, how people feel. One will impact the other. You've got the numbers to demonstrate something, people are going to feel that as well, and that's going to influence. So let's look more into practice-based teams. Well, what do I mean when I say this? And we talked on this a little bit in the keynote as well, around the team topologies and the 4 types of teams. And these are very much formal team structures. You have your streamlined teams. So these are your typical delivery teams, your feature teams, your product teams. They deliver end-to-end. And usually are set up in a way to be autonomous, that they can deliver end-to-end. They have the skills, they have the people to take from beginning all the way through production. complicated subsystem, there's all your niche teams. They exist to take cognitive load away from other teams and things that take a huge amount of cognitive load. So specialist systems usually. Enabling team. This is what we talked about a lot in the keynote. So these are your specialists that build and share capability. These are short-lived engagements. These are teams that step in, do something to support another team, an extreme aligned team, and gives them that autonomy. So an example of that might be a team specialized in quality comes in, sets up a new project on how to use Playground. Once they set that up, they disappear. They've enabled that team to do their work and continue to use Playground. Last one is your platform teams. So these are more long-term, so very similar to the enabling team, except they're longer term. They provide services, usually more of a consumption model. And a good example of that might be Gatling. You want to do load testing? Well, this team manages your Gatling infrastructure. They build up that infrastructure capability that any team can consume and use without having to understand how do I orchestrate 20 nodes to run Gatling. They take away that complexity. In addition to the formal teams we've talked about, there's also the communities of practice. These are the more informal structures. These are people with common interests, common goals. So these are going to be your guilds, your chapters, many different terminologies. What all these practices share, be it the formal structure or the informal structure, is they have an objective to help others to deliver better. They create indirect value. These teams alone do not generally solve the business problems. They do not generally deliver the business value. They support the life cycle that does deliver that value, that does solve that problems. They support the other teams. So let's look at what's unique to the practice-based teams. How is this different from any other stream-aligned team? So the first one is the team structures. Practice-based teams, such as a quality team, such as a DevOps team, operations team, security team, they tend to only have a handful of roles, usually as specialists. So you're not going to find in those teams, very often, there are exceptions, you're not going to find a product owner, product manager, delivery lead, project manager, business analyst, architect, security engineer, DevOps engineer, quality engineer, depending on the team as well. So you're going to end up with specialists, which means any individual in the team needs to play multiple roles. They need to be the BA, they need to be the delivery lead, even though that's not their speciality, that's what you're going to do in a practice team. The delivery cadence is a bit different as well. It can be more reactive, harder to plan, and a lot of coordination with others. Because you're supporting other teams, you're very dependent on their delivery cycle. So you're not in full control. Your type of work changes. You end up doing a lot more consulting work of supporting other teams and picking up a lot of the operational stuff as well of projects deliver, they move on. It's these practice-based teams that have the long-term impact of what you do and own the operational side of things. Which means not necessarily in as much control and not able to own your own destiny as much or as a blessing. So to summarize, anyone can influence using the knowledge they have and the respect they earn in the organization. The metrics and perception can measure that impact, and practice teams can be formal or informal team structures. There's no fixed formula to be able to make change. And none of that is unique to practice-based teams, but there are differences in how we approach things in practice-based teams. Next, I want to talk about the types of work. So, pretty much everything we do can be classified into 7 types of work. We'll talk about these 4 first. And the importance of these types of work is how they impact one another. So we've got, in the top right corner, we've got discovery and delivery. These are the things that are bigger than any one team. These are your business projects, your strategic initiatives. To the left of that, you have your continuous improvement. So these are the things we do to move forward without being asked. We do fairly autonomously. These are where we want that new tool, that's where that work generally goes. Our defects, I'm going to have to be careful this time. So these defects are things that impact real users, or can impact real users. I'm actually taking out from this the bugs that occur during the testing cycle, and the reason to separate them out They're part of the cost of delivery. We're delivering something new. Defects aren't something we classify up to the side. They're part of the cost of building software. The same as any other activity in the software development lifecycle is just part of delivering software. Lastly, in the bottom left corner, we have operations. This is the cost of ownership, and this is where things often get missed. There is a cost to owning software, there is a cost to building it, but there is an equal cost to owning it. So the operations part is about retaining that value, and value isn't necessarily the objective. You're not adding generally as part of the operational work. So this will be things like patching, credential rotations, certificate renewals, adjusting monitoring thresholds, license renewals. The boring stuff depends on who you are. Let's overlay that with three more aspects of work. So in the top right, you've got the consultant. This is very, very important in the enabling teams where they spend most of the time. This is where helping others to achieve discovery and delivery, but also all the other aspects as well. We've also got the administration. This is the cost of doing business. It's, the boring stuff, timesheets, payroll, but also the more important, interesting things like onboarding new team members. There's a cost of that. Building roadmaps, building out your strategy as a team. That falls into administration. Absolutely critical, but doesn't contribute to the other parts directly. Lastly, personal development. So you've got your learning, turning up to conferences, that kind of stuff. So everything you should be doing at work should fall into these categories. If it doesn't, well, check. So why do we look at each of these types of work? How do they matter? How do they influence each other? So on the bottom, we've got the motivation, either internal or external. So is it driven by our team, or is it driven outside our team? On the left, we have the intention. So are we intending to progress? So new products, new features, innovation. Or are we intending to sustain, keep operating, maximize asset value? In the top right is where your strategy. That's where your organizational strategy plays most of the time. In the left, or bottom left, you have the cost of ownership. That's what it costs to own technology. These get really interesting when we look about balance. If we focus too much on progress, we end up with instability. We don't fix bugs. We don't maintain operations. Things break. We lose that value. If we focus on the other end too much about sustaining what we have, we get obsolescence. We no longer have anything that is a viable business product. We don't have a business. Doesn't matter what the technology is. Doesn't matter how stable it is. If we look at the motivation, if we focus just on external, so just on the new features, so creating that traditional feature factory, we end up with inefficiency. If we never spend the time to build the tools we need to move faster, to build the processes we need to operate better, we're just going to be inefficient. We're going to spend more and more time wasting. And the more people you throw at that, you don't get faster. You just get more and more inefficient because now you have the communication structures on top of it. Lastly, if you just focus internal, you're not missing lines. You're not solving the real business problems. You're not generating value for the organization. And you won't have a job done. So it's about balance. And sometimes you will have to over-index. Sometimes you will end up more in one corner than the other. Some of that will be historical correction. Often organizations end up in that feature factory mindset of our only way to be the best is to spend all that time in the top right. And then have to come back really hard in the bottom left to offset that. One interesting book about this is the Phoenix Project. Definitely worth a read of the cost of balancing all these different aspects. So, what we sort of said, if you do too little continuous improvement, you're going to have more operations. You're going to do less delivery and discovery as a result as well. Don't fix things, the cost of ownership is going to go up. You're going to be able to deliver software less efficiently. You do too little operations, you're going to have more defects. You don't proactively patch your software, well, you're going to spend your time responding to security incidents. If you don't manage your thresholds of your alerting and monitoring and the operational side of things, And when you're setting up a new feature, you're going to have to spend a lot of time researching and understanding what is a reasonable metric to monitor for your new feature. If you've done your operations well, then now your delivery and discovery is a whole lot cheaper. Too little operations lead to defects. You have too many defects, well, that one's fairly obvious. You don't do a whole lot of delivery and discovery because you use that broken systems. You spend your days firefighting. So why is this all important? If we can demonstrate the relationships between the types of work, we can influence where we need to focus, what we need to improve. This becomes knowledge. This is how we influence as experts in our field. So inverting that, statements like discovery and delivery is slow, well, fix all defects, improve operations, build continuous improvement. Too many defects, very much the same. Focus on your operations, build out those proactive responses. Focus on continuous improvement, prevent those defects ever making it to a real user. Build the controls around it. And often operations is too expensive. Well, continuous improvement is the answer. Often, the operations is too expensive is approached by, well, let's outsource. Let's get rid of those problems. But all we do is temporarily reduce the cost. What we don't change is the impact to delivery velocity. That impact is still there, it's just cheaper. But that then still works. So by understanding that work, we can impact the actions that will happen of different types of work and use that knowledge to influence change. It's very much about balance. It's not trying to skew opinions, it's looking at the data. And the data might tell us that discovery and delivery is absolutely the right thing to be doing. That we should be doing more projects, more feature work. Sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is. Being first to market, being a differentiator, being ready to handle peak load of seasonal traffic. Those are all good things that, yeah, let's take the risk. The benefits far outweigh. We may spend $20 million and get a solution that's, okay, but it'll work. Then if we make $200 million on our seasonal trade, that was a good investment, regardless of how bad the quality was. Yes, we have to manage brand, we have to manage reputation, we have to manage what happens after that, but in a lot of cases, pushing forward, strangely, can be the right answer. But being able to measure that and know when it is and isn't helps a lot. And it goes back to what I said before. There's no point having perfect technology if we have no business. It's not about the technology, it's about the value and the outcomes we deliver. What's also interesting is we can then derive the cost of technical debt. So technical debt is notoriously difficult to measure, and we often measure it in terms of what's the cost to repair, what's the cost to fix the technical debt, and that then gets paid down. What does get paid down is if you can measure and communicate the impact that technical debt has. How does it slow you down? What does it cost you in terms of lost opportunity? What can't you do quickly because of that? So in terms of measuring, of the 7 types of work, delivery, discovery, continuous improvement, defects, operations are the key ones to measure. The reason they're most important is they influence one another. How little or how much you do of one or the other impacts. Practice-based teams typically don't measure the defects in operations. And a lot of that's because they get pulled into the streamlined teams and focusing on that delivery and discovery. But the defects in operations is where practice-based teams spend a lot of their time. So, don't measure consulting. Why? Because it should be small. And if it's not small, well then it's part of delivery and discovery. It's just part of the cost of doing work. But we don't want to spend the time tracking every time we have a conversation with someone to help someone on a project. That should be small. If it's not, well, we need better planning. Personal development, you're either doing enough or you're not. That becomes a conversation part of the learning and development plan. Yes, it factors into all the work we do, but it's not something we strictly schedule and build into project timelines. It's just part of the team member activity. Administration. Don't measure administration. Measure by exception. Measure it when it's a problem, when we need to communicate it's a problem. Measuring administration, otherwise it's just bureaucracy. So in terms of how that relates to a work item structure, I don't want to get too much into this, but as a very simple structure, you've got epic, feature, story, task, and bug. And this is in Jira. In Jira, your epic and feature may be combined. Different tool, different structure. Story might be called product backlog increment. It might be called a requirement. Bugs might link to a story. They might, depending on how you organize your work. What I want to point out here, though, is where to classify. So at the feature level, or some comparable in whatever your work item structure is, classify what type of work it is. That's where you classify, is it operational, is it defects, is it delivery and discovery, is it continuous improvement. But measure at the story level. Measure how many stories you did, or how much effort those stories were. They're small, medium, large. Keep it simple. The tool really doesn't matter too much. Tools can definitely be an impediment if it's not wrong, but really, this structure, the tool, doesn't matter too much, as long as you can relate to the right level of where to classify and where to measure. If you're not familiar with these terms, MEPIC is really the mapping to your strategic objectives. This is how you're hitting the organisation strategy. A feature is the collection of work that delivers value. It's that linked value. Story being the minimum increment of value that you can add within that feature. Tasks and bugs, they're just really the ways to organise work within that. And all this may vary based on internal methodology. The outcome of this talk today is not to go and say, change your internal methodology, change every way you work. It's to be able to relate this back to what's in your organisation and use that to be able to measure and communicate influence. So if we look at some examples, let's go in an e-commerce context and start in the top right corner. Delivery discovery, you might be building a marketing preferences form. And maybe that's driven by your strategy to comply with your legal obligations. Yeah, that can actually be strange. Building that out, maybe you'll have features like single sign-on, maybe you'll have being able to update your electronic communication preferences, maybe your postal mail preferences as a separate feature as well. So that's an example of your discovery and delivery. In your continuous improvement, you might have your big things like your test automation tooling refresh. Maybe the tools aren't fit for purpose for where you want to go strategically. And that might be your in-place meta proof of concept, or you're setting up browser stack for testing. I believe the sponsor today, so now that. But what's also important is this last one here of this continuous improvement FY25. Not everything you do has to be the big transformational changes to be continuous improvement. Track the small things, have the small things there, and prioritize them against everything else, but don't lose track of the small things that make a big difference. And that goes on to operations and defects, which are fairly similar, and these ones are sort of just split out into buckets based on time periods, because you don't have a giant piece of work that is operational. There will be some, like you may have the patching or operating systems which are just cost of ownership. They are part of ownership systems, they are operations, they're not delivery. If we can track these things by increments, if we can break them up into bigger pieces, great. If we can't, just use the buckets based on time periods. What you then get, once you can break these up like the different types of work, you can then compare them. And how you measure at that story level, at that unit of value, can vary. You can do work item count of how many stories you go to. But the key thing is you have to bring every source of information together, not just the delivery and discovery, but the defects that were fixed, the production incidents, the production problems, the operational activities, the patching, the upgrades, the license renewals, the continuous improvement, the tools, the transformation, the process you do. You need to bring it all into the same place, or be able to measure it comparably against multiple data sources. Once you've done that, you can count them, you can go small, medium, large, you can use story points to estimate. You can even do timesheets and track the actual time spent on each of these activities. Up the top, just counting them is definitely the easiest and cheapest. Going down to timesheets gives you the highest accuracy, that creates administrative overhead. If you don't need it, you don't. And to a degree, a lot of this doesn't matter, as long as it's consistent. But what you can then get from that is you can say, this is where I'm spending my time relative to one another. And the typical metric that gets the most attention is going to be discovery and delivery. And you can infer a lot from that. If that starts trending down, it probably means you have too much technical debt. And if you can start to see that trend, you now have a sound argument based in data for why you need to focus on paying off that technical debt, bringing on the new tools to reduce the cost of delivery. Having this data and being able to compare it against different periods as well is what you'll need for that trend. So you'll be able to compare the types within the period as well, and use it as the pointer to trigger whether you need to pivot, whether you need to take action. So I think as Cam mentioned this morning, these kind of metrics can help with justifying team growth. If you're all stuck in discovery and delivery, but we can see the rate that's going down, and everyone's just going, well, we know we've got more projects, there's more we want to do. Well, to solve what needs to be done with the effects operation continuous improvement is going to be more people. And making sure those people focus on the things, change those percentages, get more delivery and discovery. This data you can use as a tool. So to summarize that, data talks. Data is going to be really important. It can prove the basis of decisions. So by classifying and measuring those work items, we can describe our trajectory, and we can use that to influence through data-driven decisions. So I want to talk a bit about the strategic side of things and how the strategy and how the work we're doing links into the organisation strategy. So you have your vision and mission. So what your organisation strives for, how are you going to do it? That breaks down into your action plan and what are we going to actually do as an organisation to achieve that vision and mission. You'll then have your objectives, which outcomes will contribute to strategy, and your key results. How do you measure that you've made progress in those outcomes? And for anyone familiar with it, yeah, I'm talking about OKRs. So let's take an example back to e-commerce. Let's say your vision is that you want to be Australia's most trusted online fashion retailer. Your mission as part of that is to create experiences that delight your customers. So customers' experience is going to be central to how you become Australia's most trusted fashion retailer. And maybe as part of that, the strategy is your distribution centres. You're a distribution centre in every state in Australia to get products to customers fast. Your objective is to minimise the time between ordering and receiving products. That's how you're going to achieve your vision. How do you measure that? Well, you can measure a lot of different key results. Let's say 80% of your orders are fulfilled by your closest distribution centre. Say that 95% of orders are ready to ship within 2 hours. Let's also look at the technical side of that, the key result of your time to update routing rules in your order fulfillment engine. You can update those routing rules within 4 hours. And then you can take then you can relate work back to that. You can relate work to the other key results, but that's a good example of how the technical drive towards the strategy. The strategy doesn't exist in isolation. You will have your organisational level OKRs. You'll have your business units, so maybe your IT OKRs, maybe your marketing OKRs. Then you'll have your teams, so the teams within that are actually delivering the work. So I'm focusing very much on OKRs and not KPIs. Big difference with KPIs is KPIs are focused on what to do and they're usually individually focused, where OKRs focus more organisation, business unit, team focused, they're called that people success. So let's use some examples of, say, the organisation. Let's go back to an objective, organisation objective of minimising the time between ordering and receiving products. For IT, that might be reducing the lead time to fulfill orders through our fulfillment engine, or to deploy changes in our fulfillment engine. The team, the quality team, their focus might be test automation is embedded within the order fulfillment SDLC. Key result might be that the regression test suite completes in 6 minutes. So now we can relate the work we do around regression testing back all the way from I've set up this testing tool in a dev environment through to our organizational strategy. If you can demonstrate that every piece of work you do contributes to organizational strategy, you're going to have a lot more success convincing people to do it. So in terms of the actual work of that might be you're building up a process for test environment provisioning is your epic, and your feature is your master data refresh process. And then you build up the work under that. Your frequency at these different levels may vary. You may do annual organisation OKRs, annual business units. The teams may be quarterly and just focusing on a slice of that business unit and organisational objectives. So I will speed up because lunch is approaching. So what makes a good objective? Really, it provides direction. It enables autonomy. Teams can just get on with it without having to ask lots of questions. They have the information they need. The vision is clear. It tells you what to do, but also it tells you what to do, what not to do. So if things are out of that, you don't want to focus on those things, and that's a good thing. It allows you to prioritise and focus on what's most important. They're motivated and inspired. If you have the right vision, the right strategy, and the objectives towards that, people are incentivized to work towards that and feel part of that, and knowing how their work contributes is a key motivator. It also reduces waste. If you don't have a clear direction, or knowing how to get there, or knowing why it's important, the wrong work gets done. You waste free work and you end up pivoting. Some good key results. So how do we actually measure that we're achieving our objectives? Well, they should be easily measurable and they should be dynamic. It's not like you either did or you didn't achieve. They should be specific, but flexible. Don't be overly specific. Say, we want to increase credit card payments by 50%. Maybe better would be we want to increase electronic payments by 50%. And now that might be credit card, that might be buy now, pay later, that might be what we introduce tomorrow. So now we have flexibility about how we achieve that key result, which still is the same. We want more revenue. Well, now we have flexibility in how we achieve that. But it's not a deliverable. Key result is something you can measure. It's not yes or no, did we do that project? Because that doesn't measure the value that we achieved as part of doing it. Ideally, what you define as a key result or even objective, particularly at a team level, you should be able to achieve yourself when you're, or as a team. If you're dependent wholly on other teams for achieving something you are not in control, you cannot work towards that key result. You cannot be motivated by something that you can't control. And that has to be within your current team skill set as well. Don't set out for something that is challenging, but not feasible. You have to have an idea of how to achieve that within what you have as a team, as a skill set, as an organizational culture. So the reason I wanted to talk through that strategic piece is around by linking the organizational strategy, we can demonstrate value through outcomes. By demonstrating that value, we can influence the prioritization of work. We can get the things that are most meaningful to us and validate that they are meaningful and valuable to the organization, and then convey that for the strategy. So this is the power to show why your work is important. And by doing that, you gain respect by solving the organization's problems. You gain the knowledge by knowing how. So, to summarize, what you know, what you do, that creates influence. Job title, seniority, doesn't. Practices, formal or informal. Can be the community of practice, can be those formal structures, enabling team, platforms team. Work item types, the type of work we do have causation. They affect each other. The trends of data can forecast the outcomes. We can use that as influence. If we do this, this is what will change. Or more importantly, if we don't do this, this is what will change. And then everyone, every team should contribute to strategy. And I challenge you, go away today and take any work item you and your team's currently working on and see if you can identify how that leads to your organization strategy. And if you can't, and to be honest, in most cases, you can't. I've worked in many teams where I had no idea how the work I was doing was creating meaningful impact. I've worked with some I have as well. challenge that and solve it. If that link is not there, spend time working on that link, because then you can have meaningful conversations. So my story today is how you can provide a story to your organization to make change. So what's your next? Classify your work items. Measure them against the primary types of work with a consistent unit. Calculate the relativity between them and demonstrate the trend of data. Then you can influence action. Define your team's goals in the context of your organization. If your organization does not have a strategy that they publish, that's okay. I work in some organizations where they hide the strategy. Each manager knows what they need to achieve, so they get their KPIs. They keep that secret from everyone else. Bad culture, not a good idea. But if you're in that situation, create your own. Create your strategy as a team of what you want to achieve, and then use that to communicate the work you're doing and how it's contributing to your strategy. And you should be able to justify why your strategy is good. Map your work to those goals. Map it to the strategy, then you demonstrate the strategic value. Use that to influence. Came up a bit this morning as well. Being busy is normal. But no one is going to come and solve this for you. It's on us to solve these problems ourselves and to convince others that it's worth solving. But use the data to rationalize change. Spoke about a few good books. These are definitely some good books. Team Topologies, Phoenix Project, Accelerate, Drive. The first three I've talked about embeds today. Accelerate less so. Really good book around actually delivering software. Drive, fascinating book about the motivations, both of self and of others. Top reads. Okay. Question? Oh, I should have not gone to that so quickly. Okay, let's run up. What are the 4 types of work that you should measure?
Continuous improvement.
Yep.
Delivery and defects, and then methodologies.
Now, your time to ask the question back to me. Any questions?
Yeah, so like these sessions are recorded, and if you don't speak in a mic, the question won't be able to recorded.
The question here is around the discovery and delivery, because most of the time we spend most of the time on discovery and delivery, and we have no space for continuous improvement. So it's like it's a give and take. So how do you, have the balance so that we're not missing on the continuous improvement side of things?
Yeah, agreed. And it's part of having that data, and that data definitely takes time to get. Don't go into too much detail. My situation right now, we actually don't know how much continuous improvement we're doing. We think it's not enough. Our problems keep reoccurring, but we're not measuring that. If we can measure that data, even at a high level, start with really high level classification, maybe you just go and the first really high epic or feature level, how much work we're doing with different types. And if you have the basis of that data, you can show trends, you can convince them. The numbers I have today are rough indicators of what's normal for a healthy organisation. They may vary substantially depending on each organisation. But knowing what you're doing and knowing if you're facing problems that look like, well, that number's too low and we've got this problem, oh, there's correlation there, then you can start to talk about, well, we actually need to do more of one or the other to change that. So, measure, use the data.
Just wanted to ask this, what work type do you classify technical debt as? Is it cost of owning the software, or is it continuous improvement, or discovery?
It'll vary. So there is going to be an aspect of delivery discovery. Sometimes we just need to spend the time as part of projects to uplift certain things to achieve business objectives, and the cost of fixing technical debt is part of that. Sometimes it may be operational. Well, we haven't patched our system. We're 3 major versions behind this off-the-shelf product, and that's causing an operational impact. That's going to slow some delivery. Patching, owning those systems is operations, and that may be a case where you need to over-index in operations temporarily as well. It could also be under continuous improvement, or we have technical debt of We have no ability to load testing beyond 2 nodes, and our normal peak load is what 4 nodes can do. So that's actually our technical data, not being able to do that testing. Well, maybe we spend the time in continuous improvement building out test automation, orchestration of that test automation, building out that capability. So technical debt itself is not a work type, but how it's actually remediated may vary depending on the nature of it and how it fits in with the organization objectives.
This is the last question before lunch.
So my question was in relation to practice-based teams and the 4 boxes. So sometimes we have issues where we don't spend a lot of time in the discovery and delivery, and we tend to have more time in the defect section. So because we are not, sometimes we don't have the liberty of having a BA or a project manager for teams. So how do we solve this problem if we can't get a BA or a PM most of the time? So what's the solution for it?
What's another hat? Just one more hat. But it is having that data. There's all of these things, and I said it before, no one's going to solve this for us. It's unfortunate. It'd be great if they could just come in and make those problems go away, and often they do. But often we don't have that support available. So we have to, it's a lot of these concepts we've talked through today is what I've had to learn throughout my career. This isn't my specialty. This isn't what I do day to day, at least always. But it's what I've had to start doing day to day to make the impact, to influence in the way I want to. So it's just another skill we all need to bring on, and it'll help us immediately in the things we're facing now, but also throughout the rest of our career and to those around us. Knowing these skills, being able to measure the data, and being able to communicate.
Cool. Thank you. So, one huge round of applause for Graham.